Ladies and gentlemen, I speak to you not as a distant observer, but as the voice echoing from the depths of your own soul. In the hush of your heart there resides a profound invitation to release control, not in fear, but in faith, into the ever-flowing river of the self. The past is never silent. It whispers through our days, coloring our thoughts, pulling us back into patterns we believed we had escaped. One can imagine it as an invisible wind at our backs, not pushing us forward, but sucking us inward, back into memories and forms that once held us. It does not tire, it does not forget. What has been lived once, if not consciously integrated, persists as a presence that shapes the path of the present. And here lies the danger. If one does not continue to move forward, if one does not remain in motion toward what is yet unlived, the gravity of what has already been lived pulls with relentless force. It is tempting, of course, to linger there. The familiar, even when painful, has a strange security. The old injuries, the lost opportunities, the identities we once wore, they give the ego a sense of continuity. But continuity without movement is paralysis, a circle that turns endlessly upon itself. To live in such a way is to become a prisoner of one's own history, an actor repeating a script whose outcome is already known. Life then ceases to be creation and becomes only repetition. Forward movement demands a kind of death. Each step requires leaving behind what was once necessary, even precious. The child must surrender the safety of parental arms. The youth must abandon the arrogance of invulnerability. The adult must one day release the illusions of permanence. In every transition there is grief, for something once living in us becomes obsolete. Yet this grief is the price of becoming. Without it, the new cannot enter. To cling to the past is to refuse that price, to prefer the comfort of old wounds to the uncertainty of new possibilities. The psyche, however, does not tolerate stagnation for long. That which is denied forward expression seeps back in disguised forms. Regrets return as bitterness. Unlived desires reappear as envy. Unfinished struggles project themselves upon others. The unconscious does not allow what is unresolved to vanish. It demands recognition. If the ego resists moving into the unknown, the unconscious enforces movement. Through symptom, conflict, or fate, life itself conspires to remind us that stillness is an illusion, that time does not wait for us to find the courage to proceed. To walk forward is not to forget the past, but to redeem it. Memories cannot be erased, nor should they be. What has been lived belongs to the fullness of the self, but memory must not dominate. It must be integrated, transformed into wisdom, carried as nourishment for what is yet to come. Only then does the past cease to enslave. When it is accepted and understood, it no longer demands constant repetition. It becomes a foundation rather than a trap. The individual who dares to move forward discovers that life reveals itself only in motion. Each step into uncertainty opens a new horizon. Each risk uncovers hidden strength. The act of advancing requires faith, not faith in doctrines, but faith in the living process of psyche itself, in its capacity to unfold toward wholeness. Such faith does not protect one from suffering. Indeed, forward movement almost always brings new trials, but it transforms suffering from a meaningless weight into a path of becoming. It is not courage alone that sustains this movement, but necessity, for to stand still, to yield to the suction of the past, is in truth more dangerous than to step into the unknown. The one who clings is slowly devoured by what was. The one who advances, even trembling, encounters the renewal that is hidden in every challenge. Movement alone allows psyche to remain alive, to continue its endless dialogue between conscious striving and unconscious depth. Thus the task is not to escape the past, but to refuse its tyranny. The memories will remain, the wounds will remain, but they need not govern the present. What matters is the willingness to keep walking, to let each day carry us farther into the territory that has not yet been mapped. There, in the unfamiliar, the soul finds its expansion, and only by such movement can one become what one is destined to be. The past will always reach for us, but if we continue forward, its pull is transformed. It ceases to be a chain and becomes a root. Roots hold us, but they do not imprison. They nourish the tree so that it may grow toward the sky. And so it is with our own lives. Only by moving forward do we allow the past to feed us rather than consume us. The secret is motion, the quiet courage of the step beyond yesterday into the vast and living future. There is a subtle tyranny that haunts the human spirit, one that rarely reveals its face openly, yet governs the choices and moods of countless lives. It is the voice of should. You should have done this. You should not have done that. Life should have unfolded differently. People should have acted otherwise. This word, so small and so persistent, creates a prison more confining than any walls of stone. For it anchors consciousness not in the living present, but in a realm of comparison with an imagined alternative that never existed. The problem with this ghostly demand is that it belongs to an unreal world. Should measures reality against an abstraction, an ideal picture the psyche clings to as if it were law. But reality never conforms to such rigid outlines. Life is not a script already written that we have failed to act out properly. It is a stream in motion, alive with unforeseen currents and eddies. To insist upon how it should be is to turn away from how it is, and in turning away, one blinds oneself to the very meaning that is unfolding in the now. One does not escape this illusion through rebellion alone. To throw away all rules and say, "I will live without any should," is simply another posture, another mask of defiance that hides the same preoccupation. The real task is subtler, to perceive the demand of should for what it is, a projection of the ego's desire for control, for certainty, for mastery over what cannot be mastered. It is the ego's attempt to shield itself from the mystery of life by reducing the infinite to a set of prescriptions. When the should dominates, the soul becomes divided. On the one hand there is reality in all its rawness and ambiguity. On the other there is the ideal image, polished and exact, demanding conformity. Between them lies suffering, for the individual is caught between the irreconcilable. Regret blooms, resentment festers, shame takes root. The living experience of the moment is drained of vitality because the mind is preoccupied with what might have been. Thus the psyche becomes trapped in a limbo, unable to embrace what is, unable to change what was, forever measuring life against a yardstick that has no substance. To let go of this illusion requires courage, for it feels as though one is surrendering morality, ambition, or hope. Yet the truth is the opposite. By releasing the should, one makes room for authentic responsibility. Genuine responsibility is not founded on comparison with an imaginary perfection, but on engagement with reality as it stands. Only in accepting the present as it is can one respond to it honestly, and in that response lies the seed of transformation. There is also a profound compassion hidden in this act. The ego, driven by its ideals, often condemns itself mercilessly. It obsesses over mistakes. It lashes itself with the whip of "you should have known better." This self-cruelty does not lead to growth. It leads only to paralysis. By softening this grip, by recognizing the futility of punishing oneself for not being omniscient, the individual discovers a gentleness that is both healing and liberating. For the psyche is not nourished by harsh judgment, but by understanding and integration. The same holds true for others. The constant refrain that others should behave differently, should meet our expectations, should act according to our image of them, breeds nothing but bitterness and distance. When this veil is lifted, however, relationships become possible in their true form. People are seen not as they should be, but as they are: complex, flawed, and alive. This vision does not excuse harm, but it grounds us in reality, where authentic change and dialogue can occur. It is not that one abandons ideals altogether. Ideals can serve as stars guiding the traveler across dark landscapes, but one must never mistake the star for the road beneath one's feet. The star points, but the road is where life is walked, with all its unevenness and unpredictability. To live only for the star is to stumble endlessly, forever frustrated that the ground refuses to shine like the heavens. The liberation from should does not bring perfection, it brings wholeness. It allows the individual to inhabit the moment fully, to engage with life not as a failed dream, but as an unfolding reality. In this way, what once appeared as disappointment becomes material for growth, what once seemed like failure becomes experience, and what once was judged as weakness reveals itself as human truth. The task, then, is not to polish existence until it matches a flawless picture, but to accept the cracks and shadows as part of the pattern. When should dissolves, what remains is not emptiness but presence, the living pulse of being, free to expand without the suffocating weight of impossible demands. It is here, in this freedom, that the soul finally breathes and life reveals itself as it is meant to be lived. Imagine, if you will, the mighty force of your past, memories, regrets, identities sculpted from pain. In my experience, I have often warned that if one does not constantly walk forward, the past sucks one back. Each backward glance anchors us to what was and blocks the path to what might become, unfolding the universe within. Yet our egos clinging to expectations, to the trembling voice of should. It should have been different, I should have done this very should, is a cunning trap, a shackle forged by the mind that prevents us from simply seeing life. Within every human being lies a hidden counterpart, an unseen companion whose presence we often deny. This is the shadow, the collection of qualities, instincts, and impulses that consciousness rejects as unworthy, shameful, or dangerous. Yet these very elements, when pushed into darkness, do not vanish. They gather strength, waiting for the moment when repression weakens and they erupt with disruptive force. It is here, in this tension, that the mystery of transformation begins to take shape. The individual imagines that goodness and virtue are achieved by cutting away what is undesirable, by striving always to be light, pure, and elevated, but this pursuit conceals a tragic misunderstanding. One cannot ascend without first descending. The roots of the tree must sink into the black soil before the branches can stretch toward the heavens. To deny the shadow is to deny half of life itself, for without darkness there is no light, without instinct there is no spirit, without suffering there is no growth. This duality is not a flaw in existence, it is its very essence. Day gives meaning to night, and night to day. Joy is known only because sorrow has been tasted. The conscious personality, with its order and clarity, is counterbalanced by the unconscious depths, with their chaos and ambiguity. When one tries to live only on one side, clinging to light, to certainty, to control, life conspires to bring forth the other. The repressed shadow emerges in symptoms, in unexpected emotions, in projections upon others. What we refuse to face within ourselves, we inevitably encounter in the world around us. Transformation, then, does not occur through denial, but through confrontation. To meet the shadow is to stand before the stranger that lives within, to acknowledge that what is feared is not foreign, but deeply our own. Rage, envy, lust, cruelty, cowardice, these forces belong to the human soul as surely as compassion, creativity, and love. The task is not to banish them, but to integrate them, to recognize their place in the totality of one's being. In this way, the individual becomes more whole, more authentic, less enslaved by the unconscious. The process is dangerous, for the shadow has a primitive power. To engage with it requires humility, lest one be consumed. Those who descend into the depths without a guiding awareness may find themselves overwhelmed, living out the darkness instead of integrating it. Yet for the one who dares to look with honesty, the shadow reveals unexpected treasures. What was once rejected may conceal vitality, passion, even creative potential. Many talents lie dormant in the shadow because they were incompatible with the image one wished to present to the world. By reclaiming them, the individual discovers new dimensions of strength. The paradox of duality is that each pole contains its opposite. Within the destructive lies the seed of renewal, within the shadow lies the key to light. To feel anger, when integrated, gives rise to the courage to protect. To acknowledge vulnerability allows the growth of compassion. To admit weakness opens the path to authentic strength. Without the tension of opposites, the psyche cannot evolve. It is the friction between them that generates the fire of transformation. This path is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole. Wholeness embraces contradiction, holding light and darkness in the same vessel without rejecting either. It is the art of standing in the middle of duality without being torn apart. Such a state does not come easily. It is forged through struggle, suffering, and repeated confrontation with what one would rather avoid. But through this alchemical process, the personality is transfigured. It becomes less a mask and more a reflection of the true self. The greatest danger lies in identifying only with the light, believing oneself to be pure, above the primal forces of life, for such pride inevitably summons the shadow with greater vengeance. History is filled with examples of those who proclaimed ideals of goodness while enacting cruelty from the darkness they refused to acknowledge. The individual who embraces both sides, however, is less likely to be possessed by either. Awareness grants freedom, and freedom allows responsibility. In the end, transformation through shadow and duality is not merely psychological but spiritual. It teaches that life cannot be divided into simple categories of good and bad, right and wrong. Instead, life is a weaving of opposites, a dance between forces that appear irreconcilable but in truth belong together. To participate in this dance is to accept one's humanity in its entirety, to recognize that the soul expands only when it embraces both the light of the sun and the darkness of the night sky. Thus, the individual who has faced the shadow walks differently in the world. No longer afraid of darkness, no longer enslaved by appearances, such a person radiates authenticity. The energy once wasted in repression flows into creativity and presence. And in this wholeness, one becomes not a saint without shadow, but a human being complete, standing firm between the poles of duality, carrying within both the storm and the calm. Life moves in rhythms far deeper than our conscious intentions. Beneath the surface of will and desire there stirs a law that is older than reason, older than civilization itself, the tendency of every extreme to summon its opposite. Whenever consciousness clings too firmly to one direction, the unconscious begins to generate the counterweight. It is as if nature itself resists one-sidedness, demanding a restoration of balance. What the mind seeks to repress or exaggerate eventually returns, not as a choice, but as a necessity. The human being, in pursuit of certainty, often falls into such extremes. One devotes oneself wholly to rationality, dismissing the irrational as useless fantasy. Yet soon the irrational breaks through in dreams, in moods, in obsessions that cannot be explained away. Another clings to moral purity, denying all impulses of aggression or desire. In time, those very impulses erupt in destructive ways, often with greater intensity for having been denied. The law is merciless. Where one pole dominates, the other rises, hidden in the depths, until it forces its way into consciousness. This counterbalance is not punishment, but correction. The psyche, like nature, seeks equilibrium. Just as a pendulum swings back when pulled too far in one direction, so the unconscious responds to excess with its opposite movement. One may think of it as the soul's way of reminding us that no truth can exist in isolation, no principle stands without its counterpart. Light creates shadow, order presupposes chaos, strength conceals vulnerability. Whenever we forget this, life itself intervenes to remind us. The experience of this reversal can be shattering. It feels as though the ground has betrayed us, as though what we trusted most has turned into its opposite. The devout may find themselves assailed by doubt, the skeptic overwhelmed by mystical experience, the disciplined ascetic tempted by unrestrained passions. The ego resists, cries out that it has been undone, but the deeper self knows that this undoing is necessary. For without it, the individual remains trapped in narrowness, imprisoned by a single mode of being. This phenomenon reveals that the unconscious is not merely a passive storehouse of forgotten material. It is an active partner in the drama of life. It carries within it the opposites of conscious attitudes, waiting to be called forth when the balance of the psyche demands correction. In this way, it prevents the individual from becoming too rigid, too fixed, too certain of a single path. What feels like disruption is in truth an invitation to widen one's vision, to hold both sides, to endure the paradox rather than fleeing from it. The one who learns from this law discovers that opposition is not destruction but transformation. When the counterforce rises, it is not to annihilate the conscious standpoint, but to complete it. The rational is enriched by imagination, morality deepened by recognition of instinct, order enlivened by chaos. To resist the reversal is to suffer blindly, to accept it is to grow. Thus, the greatest movements of the soul are often born out of apparent contradiction. There is a humility that comes from recognizing this pattern. The ego, with its hunger for control, believes it can dictate the course of life, pressing forward with unwavering certainty. But life is not a straight line, it is a spiral, a continual turning that brings us again and again to new perspectives. Each time consciousness leans too heavily on one side, the unconscious insists upon its opposite, not to defeat us, but to remind us that wholeness cannot be attained by halves. In practice, this means learning to listen when the unexpected emerges. A sudden dream that unsettles the mind, an emotion that seems alien, a reversal of fortune that shakes our plans. These are not meaningless accidents. They are signs that the balance is shifting, that what has been neglected now demands attention. If we can respond not with denial but with openness, we discover that the counterforce carries wisdom, pointing us toward the fullness of our being. To live with awareness of this law is to embrace paradox as the fabric of existence. One cannot be only strong without also encountering weakness. One cannot be only good without also knowing the temptation of evil. The opposites define and shape each other, and the psyche thrives only when both are allowed their place. What feels like conflict is in truth the very process by which the soul evolves. Thus, the inevitable counterbalance is not an enemy but a guide. It compels us to expand beyond the narrowness of a one-sided life. It breaks apart the illusions of absolute certainty and leads us toward a deeper wholeness, where light and shadow, strength and fragility, reason and unreason coexist in dynamic harmony. To resist this rhythm is to suffer its force, to yield to it is to find transformation. In the end, the unconscious does not betray us. It restores us, reminding us that the soul's destiny lies not in clinging to one pole, but in embracing the living unity of opposites. So, I invite you now, let go. Release the weight of the past, relinquish the tyranny of should, go down into your inner darkness and embrace it. Trust the eruption of the unconscious not as chaos, but as the self asserting itself. In surrender, you do not lose yourself, you become yourself. In you surrendering, the universe unfolds through you, and when conscious and unconscious meet in harmony, you stand, no longer fractured, but whole. Walk forward with faith in the unknown, for only through letting go do we truly find the roots that lift us to the heavens. Thank you.